Any day where there's a new patch on the beta branch of the last spell is a good day in my book. So we're going to be playing that later today. So if you're watching this video right when it's released, I will probably be live streaming the last spell and exploring all of the new changes. But for now, we're going to cover what's in the dev blog, which is mostly a 10,000 foot view of the philosophy behind the changes that they're making, which, spoiler alert, I think are very smart and are going to be very interesting for the way that the game moves forward from here. And then we're going to talk about some of my own thoughts around the changes and where I think this is going to take us moving forward. So, at a high level, there are two features that are core to these changes. There is a rework of the way that they're thinking about the damage system, how damage is dealt, and then there are a few new buildings that they're adding, which is kind of like a furtherance of the production update that we got in the last one. So without further ado, let's dive into it, and we start out with the damage rework. The overall summary of the damage rework is that they want to move back to their classless roots. And what I mean by that is that right now, when you pick level up attributes in the last spell, you're focusing on a damage type. If you are a mage, you are collecting as much magic damage as you can and building your character in that direction. What that means is that you are locked into that for that character. That character will always be a magic user. If you try to pivot to ranged or to melee, it's going to go poorly for you at best. So the way that they are addressing this is they are saying that the idea of weapon type specific damage, melee, ranged, or magic, is going to be de-emphasized and is going to be replaced by flat damage scaling. That will be the primary level up thing that you get that makes you stronger over time. So you'll be collecting plus damage, and then the idea of having damage type specific bonuses like increase to magic damage are going to shift to secondary attributes and are going to become a bit rarer. So you won't be able to build a character that is full magic damage because it'll be a lot harder to find those. The only other thing that they mention here is that they're going to change some of the nomenclature. So plus damage is going to start at 0% and ramp up, whereas the type-specific damages, ranged melee, are going to start at 100% and be a multiplier on whatever damage you get. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think this is very, very interesting because if you watch any of my last spell content, the number one thing that you will have noticed is I build with a very specific purpose in mind. I build characters directly to the point that I want them to get to, and that is always a narrowly focused, get them enough accuracy, get them as much damage and as much crit as I can. This will allow me to be a lot more flexible. I'll be able to pivot characters to different things, and most importantly to their classless idea, I think it will finally make it viable to be like, I want a dagger pistol user, because you'll be primarily focusing and investing in increasing the damage of all abilities regardless of type, and you'll be able to build a class that has that kind of vibe, whatever you want to go for, right? You could go for a bully character that has a sledgehammer and a poison staff. So they fire out some poison to get contagion and poison on all of the enemies, and then they use the hammer to get massive crits or something like that. So super exciting from a philosophical perspective, opens up a lot of diversity and a lot of flexibility. So this screenshot here really just shows that they're picking a primary attribute and it is plus damage, as opposed to historically you would have like plus magic damage here. And then here, the overhaul of the character portrait is awesome. I can't tell you how frustrating it was to have to go digging deep into the secondary statistics in order to find accuracy. Accuracy being a top line statistic is really good here. Damage, crit, and resistance reduction. That's kind of like the new holy quadrangle of stats for dealing damage, and I think that that's really beneficial, and it's going to be a much smarter and more accessible way to really see how characters work. So then they talk a bit about the fact that they're going to rebalance the frequency that we're seeing these things. They don't give us a lot of information about how frequent we're going to see some of these things versus others, but they generally allude to the fact that you're going to be taking plus damage a lot, and you're not going to have enough of the physical, magic, or range damage secondary attributes to be able to specialize 100%, right? During a set of rolls, as you are leveling up a character, you're not going to find that. It does mean that if you get really lucky and you get a lot of high rolls, you could have a ridiculous character who has a lot of plus damage and, say, a lot of plus melee damage and is just a monster, which I think is also fun and adds to that kind of like roguelite, ooh, I want to build this, or I see the opportunity to build this, now I'm going to go ahead and grab it. Now for gear affixes. So basically what they're saying here is that they haven't done a pass on what things can end up on what weapons, right? So what types of affixes can you get on a particular weapon? The example that they use here has to do with, I think, hammers and propagation damage not being, or propagation bounces not being available. But basically what this means is that there's still exclusions. Not everything can get everything, but they have done a pass. I expect we'll probably never get a full dump patch notes that tells us every change that they made here, but the 3 points that they make here all seem like they're pushing in the right direction, right? They want level ups to be the most important. They want a level 3 hammer to be better than a level 2 hammer without question. Then secondarily, they want blue and legendary items to be better than green or gray counterparts. They want the drop rates to be tweaked in order to make sure that you're getting the types of things that you want with the frequency that you want them, and then the incompatibilities I was just talking about. Overall, it's good. This is like kind of a maintenance activity that they need to be doing and is important. They then show a sledgehammer that has propagation bounces. Looks good to me. Now they talk about weapon base damage. So the maximum base damage of all weapons has been increased a bit. This has been done for a few reasons. The third one to me is the most interesting, which is they are increasing the value of the reliability attribute, right? So the larger damage ranges you have, the more valuable narrowing those damage ranges is, the more valuable that reliability is. They then also are doing this as a way to counterbalance the fact that there may have been a slight buff or a slight nerf in the way that they're changing plus damage, right? The original damage rework. So we'll have to wait and see how that all pans out. And then last but not least, they make an interesting statement here about the fact that they're reducing the reliance on those attributes upon generation, right? Regarding the early stages of a run. This is something you will see if you watch some of my early, especially Glenwall runs, where I just fail because when you first start out, you have basically no agency, right? You get 3 characters, they have 3 random weapons. If those weapons are disadvantageous, you can end up in a real bind. And so I think what they're saying is that by increasing the maximum base damage, it's going to be less likely that you are constantly hitting breakpoints where, you know, every time you hit a runner with a particular weapon, you're leaving them at 5 hit points. And so you get overwhelmed in the early game. I think it's a good change. I think it is part of a larger roster of changes they need to make. The early game have more flexibility and a little more agency even on night 1, but that's a topic for another video. Then they talk about enemy damage scaling, and I thought this was really interesting, and I'll try and keep the summary brief. They go into a bunch of numbers, but the short version is basically that the way that minus damage and minus attribute stuff was applying to enemies was really weak, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? So the example that they give here is you might do minus 33 damage on an enemy, and that would take them from 100 damage to 60 damage. But then when they are scaled up to the point that they're doing 200% damage, it would take them from 200 to 170. And that never felt good. It felt not impactful. So what they've done is, it seems they've just made the damage buffs and debuffs on enemies a multiplicative type of thing so that it will always scale to how nasty the enemies are. And this idea of scaling is something that they tackle on a bunch of different things in a bunch of different places, and we'll talk about some of them, but I think it's interesting. I still think they're going to have a hard time incentivizing people to use debuff skills, unfortunately. For better or worse, killing something is always going to be better than hamstringing something, is my expectation. Now, enemy accuracy here is super interesting. I won't go into kind of like all of the specific details, but basically they say that they made a semantic change, which is enemies now miss, and they made it so that enemies can miss everything, including buildings. So the idea here is that previously enemies couldn't miss buildings, which meant debuffing accuracy was not useful. And I think they have a vision, or I have a vision, of a run where maybe you have 4 people standing right on the walls, debuffing the front lines to get rid of all of their accuracy, so they're sitting there swinging at the walls but can't hit them for the life of them. I think it's a cool idea. The other thing that they talk about here is that there's going to be a scaling component to this where enemies are going to start off with less accuracy. So this is another way to make the early game a little less punishing. I think you're going to have enemies that start with -10 accuracy and then kind of scale up over time. But short version of this is it's a rework to enemy accuracy that is designed to make it a little less punishing early on, benefit dodge perhaps even a little more in the early game, and then allow you to kind of scale up your dodge as the enemies are scaling their accuracy. Then they show this lovely animated GIF of a enemy trying to hit a wall and missing it. Can't wait. Skill progression is next. So what they say here is that while some effects are naturally effective at different stages of the game, others tend to be either too strong early or too feeble late game. And to correct this, they are going to add some abilities capacity to scale naturally over time. So they say, we decided to extend this to a few select weapons and enemy skills as well, mainly for buffs and debuff attributes like block or armor. So that means that over time, we will see some of these abilities scale up. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they communicate this in the UI. Right? How do we know that a particular skill scales or doesn't scale? I think that's going to be very interesting, and I am only a little worried that I think it's going to be applied kind of hodgepodge. I think initially it probably will be. They'll miss a few things, but we'll see. They give 2 examples of this. They show acid spray on level 0 doing -100 armor, -10 dodge, and then at level 5 doing -200 armor and -30% dodge. And likewise for shelter, which gives block. This is the Gordian ability, actually. It starts out on night 5 and grants 20 block, and then on night 10 it grants 30 block. So going to be very interesting to see how these things play out, but it is definitely a sword that is going to cut both ways because acid spray is one of our abilities and shelter is most certainly not. Now, on to the new buildings. This is pretty cool. I love that they're just tossing these in. They're not particularly heavy lifts from a development perspective, but I think they're really nice to have. So first we're going to get the Alchemist. It generates potions and scrolls, and it's going to cost 100 gold, which I think is slightly more than some of the other ones, but getting an Alchemist early can mean that you're going to be flush with potions and scrolls. And I think this is the magic of the production overhaul that I've talked about a little on stream, but just to kind of like go over it here, when you go production and you don't lean on the shop, it feels really good because you get to the end of the run and your characters are kitted out. They have a lot of options, they have a lot of power, they're rocking a lot of legendaries. This was missing though, for potions and scrolls, right? You just had to buy them. And potions and scrolls are exceptionally powerful, exceptionally useful. And I think it's really cool that you're going to be able to get them. And basically all of your characters will probably have plenty of potions. You'll be using them. You'll be utilizing them. Then second is the jeweler, which again, I also think this is a great addition. They're going to be doing trinkets and, all of the standard things that jewelers do. And these particular items are going to get pulled out of the armorer, which I think is also really good because I would often build an armorer hoping to get trinkets because I often sell trinkets in the early game in order to kind of get my economy going. And then I have a hard time backfilling them. And usually what I use is build 2 armorers, but this is going to be significantly nicer. So I think this is going to be really cool. And they also mentioned that the Alchemist was a community feedback suggestion, which I think is really cool. I like it when games note those types of things. So here's an example of the Alchemist giving someone a few different options. Looks like a potion of speed, flame pillar, and lightning bolt. Really cool, really useful, and is going to benefit as you level up your production, which I think is really nice. Other changes, the hero portrait and info quality of life thing, I think this is awesome. So the leftmost picture is showing you that you're going to have a lot more information about the character that you're currently rocking, that you currently have selected. I think that this is really interesting. I hope that when you mouse over the panes that show like damage, accuracy, crit, and resistance reduction, you see the full breakdown. They've done that for other things, so I hope that's going to be the case. We'll be checking that tonight. And then I also love the at a glance right picture, which shows you numerically when you mouse over how many action points do you left, how much movement, and how much mana do you have left. Beautiful. I think these are the kinds of quality of life improvements that over time really are going to catapult the game to that next level. As for perks, Crippling Punch has entered the chat. Don't know what it does yet. I assume it's going to be one of those debuff skills, like maybe it converts Punch to Crippling Punch, and now Punch has a damage reduction and accuracy reduction or something like that. They've also removed the perk versatility, right? Because now everyone is versatile by nature, which I think is cool. And then the tier 2 perk flexibility is now going to be moved to tier 4 and rebalanced accordingly. Now, if I recall correctly, flexibility is the one that if you alternate between, say, melee and ranged, it gives you a damage bonus. We'll need to check that. I didn't have time to check that before making this video. Wanted to get it out before my live stream. Bodybuilder and Head-On have also been slightly tweaked to better fit the new values. I don't know if that's a nerf or an improvement. We will find out. And then they continue to optimize the game. My fingers are crossed for this. For those also who have watched my live streams, you'll know that the game has a tendency to chug a bit, especially in the later waves. Hopeful that this is a further improvement. The memory leak that they fixed like 2 patches ago was also great. And then for bug fixes, there was nothing particularly noteworthy here. Some fixes to viewability of health, soft lock issues around spiky counters, undoing moves, weird camera movements. All of these things are excellent. And yeah, just to go back and do an overview, I think these are fantastic changes. I think the damage rework is going to be so cool for making the builds that you can do more diverse. I think the new buildings are just fun and demonstrate the way when they put new systems in, it allows them for relatively small development hours to add new functionality. And yeah, I'm really just excited to get in there and try out these new changes and see how things scale. So if you're interested in sharing that journey with me, you can find me live streaming 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 1 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. I play Last Spells, at least at the moment, on Tuesdays. And other than that, I have a Discord. It's linked below. If you want to hop in, we talk about patch notes and all of these different things, all of the games that we play, the strategies that are working for us or not working for us, and generally rage at the games that are causing us frustration. But for now, that's been it for me. If this video is useful, please toss me a like and a subscription. And yeah, thank you for watching. Catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.